Rain hammered against the restaurant windows like desperate tears against glass that would never break. Inside the elegant establishment in the city's upscale district, candles flickered over pristine white tablecloths, casting dancing shadows across the satisfied faces of diners who had never known true hunger. But Sofia Ramirez wasn't looking at the flames or the faces. Her eyes, deep and weary, drifted every 5 minutes to the illuminated screen of her phone, hidden in the pocket of her impeccable black apron. When the last customer left the restaurant near midnight, Sofia finished her shift with the same mechanical efficiency as always. She cleaned tables with precise movements, folded napkins into perfect triangles, inspected each glass until it shone without a single spot. Her hands, despite the exhaustion of 9 hours on her feet, didn't tremble. She couldn't afford that luxury. What she didn't know was that the man at table 12 had been watching her throughout the entire dinner. Sebastian Cortez, 42 years old, fortune valued in figures most people couldn't even pronounce, had noticed something in that waitress that disturbed him in a way he didn't understand. It wasn't her beauty, though she had it, hidden beneath the weariness and severity of her expression, but something deeper. The way she held back tears when she looked at her phone, the rigidity of her spine that spoke of iron pride, the professional smile she placed like a perfect mask when serving each plate, only for it to vanish the moment she turned her head. When Sofia exited through the restaurant's back door, with her worn coat barely protecting her from the cold October rain, Sebastian made an impulsive decision that surprised even himself. He left a $100 bill under his barely touched wine glass and followed her. He followed her through rain-slicked streets, where neon lights reflected in puddles that looked like portals to another world. He followed her, as she didn't walk toward any of the modest apartments in the area where he expected her to live, but toward something completely different. San Rafael Public Hospital rose like a grey fortress against the night sky, its irregularly lit windows seeming like the tired eyes of an insomniac giant. Sofia entered through the automatic doors without hesitation, her step acquiring an urgency she hadn't shown all night. Sebastian stopped in the parking lot, under the shelter of his designer umbrella that cost more than her monthly salary, and watched. He watched, as she disappeared toward the pediatric wing, how her shoulders finally slumped when she crossed that threshold, as if only then did she allow herself to drop the weight she carried. And in that moment, the richest man in the city felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the piercing curiosity of seeing someone more real than everything he had known in his world of glass and steel. Dawn found Sofia Ramirez where midnight had left her, in an uncomfortable plastic chair beside a hospital bed, holding the hand of an 8-year-old girl whose brown hair had barely begun to grow back after months of chemotherapy. Elena Ramirez, with her enormous eyes that seemed to contain all the world's wisdom compressed in her small, fragile body, looked at her sister with a mixture of love and concern that broke the heart. "Sofia," whispered the girl in a hoarse voice, "you need to sleep." "I slept," Sofia lied, gently stroking her sister's forehead. "I slept enough." "You lie as badly as I do when I say the injections don't hurt." A genuine smile, the first in hours, illuminated Sofia's face. In the midst of the deepest pain, sometimes it's the most vulnerable who teach us to be strong. 3 years ago, when their parents had died in that absurd accident, a truck with no brakes, a dangerous curve, 1 second of difference that changed everything, Sofia had been 29 years old with a bright future as a newly graduated jewelry designer from art school. Eleanor had been 5 years old with a rare disease that was just beginning to manifest. There was no time for mourning. There was no time for dreams. There were only decisions: abandon her shared workshop, sell everything that could be sold, get work anywhere that paid well, and dedicate every second, every penny, every heartbeat to keeping Elena alive. "The test results come today," said Elena, with that brutal clarity that sick children develop. "Do you think the bad cells will have decreased?" Sofia swallowed the lump in her throat. "I believe it with all my heart." "But if they haven't, what will happen? Then we'll look for another treatment. There's always another treatment, my love, always." Dr. Mendez entered at 7 in the morning, with her starched white coat and carefully neutral expression that Sofia had learned to read like an open book. The news wasn't good. "The tumor hasn't responded to the current treatment," said the doctor, sitting on the edge of the bed. We need to consider more aggressive options. Sophia felt the floor open beneath her feet, but maintained her composure. She always maintained her composure. What options? There's a clinical trial in the city. It's experimental, but the initial results are promising. The problem is the cost, Sophia completed. It was always the cost. Dr. Mendez nodded sadly. Public insurance covers only a portion. The rest, I'll find a way. The 3 words sounded like an unbreakable promise, like a sacred vow. Elena squeezed her sister's hand, and in that squeeze was an absolute faith that Sophia didn't dare betray. When she left the hospital at 8:30 in the morning, with the autumn sun cutting through the cold air, Sophia allowed herself exactly 30 seconds of panic. 30 seconds to tremble, to feel the crushing weight of responsibility, to wonder how the hell she was going to come up with another $15,000 in 2 months. Then she straightened up, adjusted the worn bag over her shoulder, and began walking toward her apartment. She had 3 hours to sleep before her cleaning shift at the downtown office building. After would come the afternoon at home with Elena, helping her with schoolwork she did from the hospital bed, and at night back to the restaurant. What Sophia didn't see, as she walked away from the hospital with her shoulders proud despite exhaustion, was the man who had spent the entire night in his car, in the parking lot, watching the illuminated windows on the 3rd floor, trying to understand why a stranger's fate mattered so much to him. Sebastian Cortez had built an empire based on 2 fundamental principles: information and timing. He knew the right moment to buy was when everyone was selling, and the moment to build was when everyone doubted. But for the first time in 20 years, he found himself doing something completely irrational. He hired a private investigator. "Mr. Cortez," said the investigator a week later, depositing a manila envelope on the mahogany desk, "here's everything I could find about Sofia Elena Ramirez." Sebastian didn't open the envelope immediately. Instead, he looked out the window of his office on the 40th floor, where the city spread like a chessboard below him, and wondered when exactly he had crossed the line between professional curiosity and personal obsession. Sofia Ramirez's life was summarized in 10 pages that read like a survival novel. Eldest daughter of a working-class family, brilliant student who had won a full scholarship to the School of Arts and Design, graduated with honors at 26. 3 years working on her own artisan jewelry line, with enthusiastic reviews in independent design magazines, and then the accident. The next 3 years were a blur of multiple jobs, growing medical debts, and a girl whose disease was called Ewing's sarcoma, with a survival rate that made Sebastian's heart constrict. There were also photos of Sophia before the accident, smiling with long loose hair, eyes bright with ambition and youth, surrounded by her designs in a small gallery. And recent photos, thinner, with hair pulled back in a severe bun, eyes that had seen too much, but with that straight spine that spoke of a will that refused to break. "I also found this," said the investigator, pointing to the last page. "She still designs jewelry. She sells them at an artisan fair on Sundays. The prices are ridiculously low for the quality of the work." Sebastian studied the photos of the pieces, delicate necklaces with intertwined symbols, earrings that seemed to capture light in impossible ways, bracelets with patterns that told stories. Each piece had a small card explaining the meaning: rebirth, hope in darkness, the strength of roots. "There's something else, sir," continued the investigator, with some hesitation. "She's refused 3 times the offer of help from the hospital's charity fund. She says she doesn't accept handouts." Sebastian let out a humorless laugh. Of course she didn't accept handouts. He had recognized that in her from the first night, the pride that was both her armor and her prison. During the following 2 weeks, Sebastian did something he had never done in his entire professional life. He took Sunday afternoons off, and every Sunday he appeared at the artisan fair in the Central Park, disguised as an ordinary citizen in jeans and a casual jacket that probably cost more than Sophia's entire inventory. The first time he saw her there, he was fascinated. Sophia had a small folding table with a faded blue tablecloth, her jewelry carefully arranged on black velvet. She didn't shout to attract customers like other vendors. Instead, she worked while waiting, her agile fingers weaving silver wires into new designs, completely absorbed in her work. There was a peace in her face that she never showed at the restaurant or the hospital. Here, for a few hours each week, she was simply an artist creating beauty. Sebastian bought a bracelet the first Sunday. A simple silver piece with a symbol, she explained, represented the courage to continue. He paid the price she asked, $30, and left before she could notice that his hands trembled while holding that small work of art. The second Sunday, he bought a pair of earrings. The third, a necklace, each time asking questions about the process, listening as she explained with contained passion the techniques her grandmother had taught her, the traditional symbols she incorporated into modern designs. "Do you collect jewelry?" she asked on the fourth Sunday, with a small, curious smile. "Let's say I recognize talent when I see it," he responded, and for the first time in weeks they shared a direct look that lasted 1 second longer than necessary. What Sebastian didn't know was that Sophia had begun to recognize him, not just from the market but from the restaurant. He was the man at table 12 who always ordered the same thing and watched her with an intensity that should have made her uncomfortable, but instead intrigued her. And what neither of them knew was that this fourth Sunday would be the last peaceful one they would have. Monday morning, Sophia received the call that would change everything. "Miss Ramirez?" The voice on the other end of the line was elegant, cultured, with an accent that spoke of expensive education. "My name is Valentina Solis. I'm the curator of the Modernist Gallery. Do you have a few minutes to talk about your work?" Sophia almost dropped the phone. The Modernist Gallery wasn't just any gallery. It was the gallery, the place where emerging artists dreamed of exhibiting, where careers were launched or sunk. Yes, of course." "Excellent. Someone sent us photographs of your pieces, along with a description of your technique and artistic philosophy. We're organizing a collective exhibition of emerging artists for December, and we'd love to include your work. Would you be interested?" Sophia's heart beat so hard she was sure the curator could hear it through the phone. "Who sent the photographs?" "An anonymous benefactor. We have several who support the new talent program. So, could you come to the gallery this week to discuss the details?" After hanging up, Sophia sat on the edge of her narrow bed in the one-bedroom apartment she shared with Elena, her hands trembling. This was the opportunity she had dreamed of, the kind of platform that other artists spent years trying to secure. But it was also terrifying. For an exhibition at the Modernist Gallery, she would need to produce at least 20 pieces of much higher quality than what she sold at the fair. That meant better, more expensive materials. It meant time she didn't have. It meant energy that was already at its limit. What was that? Elena appeared in the doorway, pale but with eyes bright with curiosity. She had had a good day, and the doctors had allowed her to come home for the afternoon. "An art gallery wants to exhibit my work." Eleanor's squeal of joy made it all worthwhile. The girl jumped as high as her fragile body allowed and wrapped her thin arms around Sophia's neck. "I knew it. I knew someone would see how special you are." Sophia hugged her sister, allowing herself, for the first time in a long while, to feel something like hope. Success is not just the achievement of our dreams, but the permission we give ourselves to dream again. The meeting at the Modernist Gallery was surreal. Valentina Solis was a 60-year-old woman with perfect silver hair and impeccable taste, surrounded by art worth more than Sophia would earn in her entire life. But the curator treated her as an equal, talking about artistic vision and cultural narrative, with a respect that made Sophia feel, for the first time in years, like more than a surviving waitress. "Your pieces have something unique," said Valentina, studying the photos on her glass desk. "There's an authenticity, a connection with tradition that feels modern at the same time. The market is hungry for genuine voices." "I'll need time to create enough pieces for the exhibition," Sophia admitted. "And the materials." "The materials budget is covered," Valentina interrupted. "The anonymous benefactor who recommended your work also established a fund for emerging artists in the exhibition. It will cover up to $5,000 in production costs." Sophia felt her face flush. $5,000. It was a fortune. It was also, she suspected with growing certainty, too specific to be coincidence. "Who is the benefactor?" "I'm sorry, he signed a confidentiality agreement, but I can tell you he's been following your work for some time." When Sophia left the gallery that afternoon, her mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. She was euphoric about the opportunity, grateful for the support, but also uneasy. She didn't believe in coincidences, and there was a man who bought her pieces every Sunday, who looked at her with those dark, inscrutable eyes, who had the kind of wealth that could make an opportunity like this appear out of nowhere. That night, when Sebastian Cortez entered the restaurant at his usual time and sat at table 12, Sophia decided the time for truth had come. She approached his table with controlled elegance, placed the menu in front of him, and said in a low but firm voice, "I need to talk to you. After my shift. Please don't leave." Sebastian looked up, surprised by the direct tone. In his eyes was something she couldn't quite decipher, but he nodded slowly. "I'll be here." The next 2 hours were the longest of Sophia's life. She served tables, smiled at customers, performed her tasks with mechanical efficiency, all while feeling the weight of Sebastian's gaze following her through the restaurant. And when finally the last customer left and the dining room lights dimmed, she approached his table where he still waited, with a glass of red wine he had been absent-mindedly swirling for an hour. "You're the anonymous benefactor." It wasn't a question. Sebastian didn't deny it. "How did you know?" "Because no one else knows me well enough to know I need that help, but well enough to know I wouldn't accept it directly from them." Sophia sat in the chair across from him, something she would never have dared to do during work hours. "Why?" "Because you have talent the world needs to see." "That's not the whole truth." Sebastian studied her for a long moment, and in his gaze was a vulnerability she didn't expect from a man of his reputation. "The hardest truth to admit is not our weakness, but our deepest emotional needs." "Because," he said finally, his voice low, 3 years ago my wife left me and took my son. She said I had become a monster who only knew how to accumulate money and power. She was right." He paused, looking at his glass. "The night I followed you from this restaurant to the hospital, I saw you enter that cold, terrible place with more purpose and determination than I've felt in years. And I wondered when I had lost that, when I had forgotten that true value isn't in how much you have, but in how much you're willing to give." The silence between them was dense, charged with unspoken confessions. "I don't need to be saved," said Sophia, softly but firmly. "I know. That's why it's the first time in years I've helped someone I really care about seeing succeed." "And what do you get from this?" Sebastian smiled, a sad smile that contained years of regret. "Maybe the chance to learn from someone who understands what sacrifice really means." Sophia looked directly into his eyes, and in that moment, something changed between them. It wasn't love yet, it was too soon, too complicated, but it was the beginning of understanding, the mutual recognition of two broken souls trying to find their way back to the light. "I won't accept any more unsolicited help," she said finally. "If you're going to be in my life, I want honesty. No anonymous surprises, no games." "Agreed. And you don't owe me anything. This opportunity at the gallery, I'll earn it on my own. If my work isn't good enough, let it fail." "Your work is extraordinary. It won't fail." Sophia stood to leave, but stopped beside his table. "Why do you come here every night?" Sebastian looked at her with brutal honesty. "Because I need to remember that real people still exist in the world, and you're the most real thing I've known in a long time." That night, when Sophia walked home under the cold November stars, she carried with her something more than exhaustion. She carried the seed of a possibility that scared her as much as it excited her. The following 2 months were the most intense of Sophia's life. The nights at the restaurant continued, but something had changed. Sebastian still arrived at 9, still sat at table 12, but now they talked. Small interactions at first, comments about the weather, about a book they had both read, about the music playing softly in the background. But gradually those conversations deepened. "How's Elena?" he invariably asked. "Fighting," she always responded. As always. One night, during an unusual break when the restaurant was quiet, Sophia briefly sat at his table with a cup of coffee she desperately needed. "Can I ask you something personal?" she said. "Always." "Your son. How old is he?" The pain that crossed Sebastian's face was so deep that Sophia immediately regretted the question. But he answered, 10. His name is Matteo. His mother took him to Europe 3 years ago. I can see him twice a year if I fly there. Each time he's more distant, more alien to me. Why don't you fight for more time? Because she was right to leave. I wasn't a good father. I was so obsessed with building my empire that I forgot I already had the only thing that really mattered. He looked up at her. You love Elena more than I've ever loved anything. I see it every time you mention her name. She's all I have left, Sophia admitted, her voice breaking. If I lose her, you won't lose her. You can't promise me that. No, I can't. But I can promise you that I'll do everything in my power to help if you'll let me. Sophia nodded slowly, allowing for the first time someone else to share the weight of her fear. Meanwhile, work on the pieces for the gallery consumed every free moment of Sophia's. Her apartment, always small, had become a chaotic workshop. Silver and gold wires coiled over the kitchen table. Semi-precious stones rested in small boxes, organized by color. Specialized tools were scattered across all available surfaces. Elena had become her unofficial assistant, helping to organize materials when her health permitted, offering opinions with the seriousness of a professional art critic. This necklace needs something more, declared the girl one afternoon, holding a complex piece that had taken Sophia 3 days to create. It needs hope. What does hope look like? Elena thought for a moment, her enormous eyes fixed on the jewelry. Like a small light that refuses to go out. Like you, Sophia. You keep shining, even when it's dark. Tears stung Sophia's eyes as she added a small opal stone, which changed color with the light, to the center of the design. Eleanor was right. The piece was complete now. Sebastian began appearing on Sundays at the artisan fair, no longer pretending to be a casual customer. He brought coffee for Sophia, exactly how she liked it, with a little cinnamon, and sat in a folding chair next to her table, sometimes working on his laptop, sometimes simply watching her create. "Don't you have better things to do on a Sunday morning?" she asked once, though she secretly appreciated his company. "Like what? Count my money? Review investments that multiply without me doing anything?" Sebastian closed his laptop. "This is more valuable. This is real." People at the fair began to notice the elegant man accompanying the jeweler. Rumors began, curious looks, but Sophia ignored them. She had more important things to think about, like the fact that Elena's experimental treatments were working. The tumors had shrunk by 15%. It wasn't a cure, but it was hope, and hope was all they needed to keep going. One Sunday afternoon, after they had packed up the stall, Sebastian invited Sophia and Elena for ice cream. The girl, who felt energetic enough to go out that day, accepted with an enthusiasm that made both adults smile. Watching Sebastian with Elena was revealing for Sophia. He talked to the girl as if she were a complete person, without condescension, listening to her opinions about movies and books with genuine attention. Elena, in turn, instantly adopted him, bombarding him with questions about everything from his most famous buildings to whether he believed in aliens. "I like him," Elena declared when Sebastian went to the bathroom, her lips stained with chocolate. "He's like you, Sophia. He's sad inside, but tries to be kind on the outside." "How do you know he's sad?" "His eyes," said Elena, with that unsettling wisdom that sick children seem to develop. "When he looks at me, I see the same thing as when you look at pictures of Mum and Dad, like he misses something that will never come back." Sophia didn't know what to answer because Elena was right, as always. That night, after putting Elena to bed, Sophia found herself on her tiny balcony overlooking a noisy street, holding her phone, looking at Sebastian's number that he had saved there during one of their recent conversations. She didn't have a specific reason to call him. She just felt the need to hear his voice. He answered on the first ring. "Sophia, is everything okay?" "Everything's fine, She stopped, feeling absurd. "Elena says she likes you." Sebastian's soft laugh came through the line. "She's extraordinary, like her sister. Thank you, for the ice cream, for everything. You don't have to thank me for spending time with people who make me remember what's important in life." They talked for 2 hours that night, about everything and nothing. Sebastian told her about his childhood in a poor family, how he had worked 3 jobs during college, how he had built his first building with loans that almost bankrupted him. Sophia told him about her grandmother, who had learned the jewelry craft from her own mother, how each symbol had a meaning rooted in her culture, how creating beauty was her way of honoring that heritage. "You know what I admire most about you?" Sebastian asked near midnight. "What?" "That despite everything you've lost, you still believe in beauty. You still create beautiful things in an ugly world." "Someone has to do it," Sophia responded. "If we wait for the world to be perfect before creating beauty, we'll never create anything." When they finally hung up, Sophia stayed awake, looking at the faint stars barely visible through the city's light pollution, and realized with a mixture of terror and wonder that something was changing in her heart. The exhibition at the Modernist Gallery was scheduled for December 15th, and as the date approached, Sophia's panic grew proportionally. She had completed 18 pieces, each representing a different aspect of her journey: deep roots, a necklace with symbols of her cultural heritage, phoenix in ashes, earrings that captured the idea of rebirth, guardian of dreams, a bracelet dedicated to Eleanor, and 15 more, each with its own story. But completing the pieces was just the beginning. Now came the scary part, exposing them to the world, allowing strangers to judge her work, her soul poured into silver and stones. "You're magnifying this out of proportion," said her best friend Carla, who also worked at the restaurant. "It's just an exhibition." "It's not just an exhibition," Sophia responded, carefully packing each piece in padded boxes. "It's everything. It's the opportunity to be seen as something more than a waitress, to prove I'm still the artist I was before everything changed." Carla looked at her with a strange expression Sophia couldn't interpret. There was something about her friend lately, a tension, a distance that worried her, but every time she tried to address it, Carla changed the subject. "Is that rich guy going to be there?" Carla asked. "Your secret benefactor?" "Sebastian, his name is Sebastian. And yes, probably." "Sebastian?" Carla raised an eyebrow. "Now we're on a first-name basis? What's next, Sophia? A proposal?" "It's not like that. He's a friend." "Men like him aren't friends with women like us," Carla said bitterly. "They're benefactors, clients, sometimes lovers, but not friends. Not really." The words hurt more than Sophia expected, mainly because they touched the secret fear she herself harbored. The difference between classes is not just about money, but about worlds separated by experiences that can never truly be understood between them. But then came the opening night, and everything else disappeared. The Modernist Gallery was transformed into a magical space. The pristine white walls served as a perfect canvas for the strategically illuminated pieces. Each of Sophia's jewels was mounted in individual glass cases with its explanatory card, its stories available for the world to read. Sophia arrived 2 hours early with Elena, who had insisted on being present despite her exhaustion. The girl, wearing her best dress, bought especially for the occasion with part of the money from the fair, observed her sister's pieces with evident pride. "They're beautiful," Elena whispered. "Mom and Dad would be so proud." Sophia had to excuse herself to the bathroom to cry in private. Those words, coming from the person she loved most in the world, meant more than any art critic's review ever could. When the doors opened at 7, the avalanche began. More than 200 people filled the gallery. Art collectors, critics, other artists, wealthy, curious seekers looking for the next big thing. Sophia, dressed in a simple black dress that had been her mother's, stood in a corner trying to breathe while watching strangers study her work. "You should be circulating," Valentina whispered to her. "These are important people, contacts." But Sophia couldn't move. She was paralyzed by terror and hope intertwined. And then she saw Sebastian. He entered the gallery with the natural confidence of someone accustomed to dominating any room, but his eyes sought her out immediately. When their gazes met across the crowd, he smiled, not the polished businessman smile, but something genuine and warm, and walked directly toward her. "They're talking about you," he said when he reached her side. "Everywhere. Your work is the most commented on of the night." "Is that good?" "It's extraordinary." Sebastian looked around at the crowd. You see that man in the grey suit next to Deep Roots? He's the editor of the country's most important design magazine, and the woman in the red dress has been curator of the National Museum. Both have been talking about your work for the last 20 minutes. Sophia's heart beat so fast she thought she might faint. The night unfolded like a dream. People approached her with questions about her technique, her inspiration, her availability for commissions. Business cards accumulated in her purse. An important collector bought 3 pieces on the spot, paying prices that made Sophia have to sit down. But the moment that sealed her success came when an elegant woman of about 60, dressed in silver tones, stopped in front of Guardian of Dreams, the bracelet dedicated to Elena, and began to cry silently. "Are you okay?" Sophia asked, approaching with concern. The woman looked at her with shining eyes. "I lost my daughter 2 years ago. She was 9. Cancer. This piece captures exactly what it felt like being her mother. The love, the fear, the determination to protect her even when I couldn't." She held Sophia's hand. "Can I buy it? I don't care about the price." "It's not for sale," Sophia responded softly. "It was made for my sister. But if you want, I can make a similar one for you. One that honors your daughter." The woman nodded, unable to speak, and hugged Sophia in the middle of the gallery. And in that moment, Sophia understood something fundamental. The true value of art is not in its price, but in its capacity to connect human hearts through shared pain and beauty. Near 10 o'clock at night, when the crowd began to disperse, Sophia found Elena asleep in a chair, her head resting on Sebastian's lap, who had been caring for her all night. The image, that powerful man with a fragile girl asleep against him, his hand protectively over her shoulder, made something break in Sophia's heart. "It's been a long night for her," Sebastian said in a low voice, not wanting to wake the girl. "For all of us. But a good night. A night that will change everything." Sophia sat beside them, and for a moment the 3 formed a strange provisional family in the middle of the emptying gallery. Sometimes families are not created by blood or marriage, but by choice, by presence, by small acts of care that accumulate until they become something unbreakable. "Thank you," Sophia whispered. "For what?" "For being here, for not trying to fix everything, for simply being." Sebastian looked at her with an intensity that made her feel seen in a way she had never experienced before. "There's no other place I'd rather be." That night, when they finally arrived home in Sebastian's car, who had insisted on driving them, Eleanor woke up enough to murmur, half asleep, "Is Sebastian going to be part of our family now?" The question floated in the air unanswered, but the looks the 2 adults exchanged contained possibilities that neither dared to name yet. The days after the exhibition were a whirlwind of opportunities that Sophia could barely process. 3 more galleries contacted her wanting to represent her work. The design magazine published a full-page article about the new voice in contemporary artisan jewelry. A luxury hotel downtown wanted to commission her an art installation for their lobby. Social media exploded with photos of her pieces, shared thousands of times by influencers and collectors. And with success came the problem Sophia had feared. She couldn't handle it alone. She sat at her small kitchen table one afternoon, surrounded by orders she couldn't complete, emails she didn't have time to answer, contract proposals she didn't understand, and finally allowed herself to admit the truth. She needed help. Sebastian appeared at the restaurant that night as usual, but Sophia could barely concentrate on work. During her break, she sat across from him with tears of frustration in her eyes. "Everything's happening too fast. I have orders for $20,000, but I have no way to produce that much. I have contract offers, but I don't understand the legal terms. I have—" Her voice broke. "I have the success I always wanted, but it feels like I'm drowning in it." Sebastian listened in silence, and when she finished, he didn't offer immediate solutions. Instead, he asked questions. What part of the process did she want to keep under her control? What tasks would she be willing to delegate? What was her long-term vision? "I want to maintain creation," Sophia said finally. "Every important piece has to be made by my hands, but everything else, Order management, marketing, contracts, production of basic components. She sighed. I have no idea how to handle that. Then let me help you build a team. I can't pay for it. It's not about payment. It's about building something sustainable. Sebastian leaned forward. I've spent the last 2 months researching how luxury artisan businesses are structured. I know artisans who could help you with production. I know lawyers who work pro bono with emerging artists. I know assistants who would want the experience of working with you. But accepting all that from you, it's not coming from me as a benefactor, Sebastian interrupted. It's coming from me as someone who cares about you and doesn't want to see you destroy yourself through misdirected pride. These are connections, Sophia. Resources, knowledge, not money. You still make all the decisions, you still own your work. You're just using available tools intelligently. Sophia considered this for a long moment. There was a difference, she realized, between accepting charity and accepting collaboration, between being saved and choosing to use help to save herself. Okay, she said finally, but with conditions. I want to meet all these people personally. I want clear contracts, and I maintain complete creative control. Of course. During the next 2 weeks, Sebastian kept his promise. He organized meetings with trusted artisans who could produce basic components under Sophia's supervision. He connected Sophia with Clara Mendoza, a lawyer specializing in intellectual property, for artists who offered her services at a reduced cost. He introduced Sophia to Monica Paz, a recent business administration graduate looking for experience, who was willing to work as an assistant in exchange for credit in her portfolio. Slowly, painfully, Sophia began to release the iron control she had maintained over every aspect of her life for 3 years, and something extraordinary happened. She breathed more easily. With Monica handling emails and orders, Sophia could concentrate on creating. With the artisans producing chains and basic components, she could focus on the unique pieces that only her hands could make. With Clara navigating the contracts, she could be sure she wasn't being exploited. But the most significant transformation came in her relationship with Sebastian. One Sunday afternoon, he arrived at Sophia's apartment with a bag of Chinese food and an unusual proposal. Elena, he said, addressing the girl who was curled up on the sofa with a book, would you like to go to the park next week? There's a science fair I thought you might like. Eleanor's eyes lit up. Really? Really? But only if your sister says it's okay. Elena looked at Sophia with evident pleading. Please, please, can I go? Sophia felt a wave of conflicting emotions. On one hand, the joy of seeing Elena excited about something normal, childlike. On the other, the fear of allowing Elena to get too close to Sebastian, of giving her hopes of a family that might not materialize. Can I talk to you outside? She told Sebastian. In the narrow hallway outside the apartment, Sophia confronted her fears directly. Elena is starting to see you as a father figure. If this isn't going anywhere, I need to know now. I can't let her get hurt. Sebastian looked at her with absolute seriousness. Sophia, I don't know exactly where we're going. I can't promise you a fairy tale ending, but I can promise you this. I'm not going to disappear. Elena has become important to me. You've become important to me, and I have no intention of leaving. What if you get bored of our complicated life, of hospitals and treatments and limitations? I already lived in a world without real complications. It was empty. Sebastian took her hand. All of this, is the only thing that has felt real in years. That night, after Sebastian left, after Eleanor fell asleep with a dreamy smile, Sophia allowed herself, for the first time in 3 years, to imagine a future that wasn't defined solely by survival. But the universe, as it often does, had other plans. The call came at 3 in the morning, the kind of call every family member of a cancer patient fears. Elena had had a crisis. The doctors were asking Sophia to come immediately. With trembling hands, Sophia called the only number on her speed dial besides the hospital, Sebastian. He answered on the first ring, his voice immediately alert. What happened? Elena, hospital, I need... She couldn't finish the sentence. I'm on my way. 5 minutes. It was exactly 5 minutes. Sebastian arrived in his car, still in sleepwear under a hastily thrown-on coat, and drove through the city's night streets as if lives depended on it. Because perhaps they did. In the emergency room, while doctors worked on Elena behind closed doors, Sophia finally collapsed. All the months of being strong, of maintaining composure, of convincing herself that everything would be okay, collapsed in a moment. Sebastian held her while she sobbed into his chest, while all her worst nightmares threatened to come true. And he didn't say everything would be okay, because he didn't know. He didn't offer empty promises or false comfort. He was just there. He just held her. He just shared the weight of her terror without trying to fix it. When Dr. Mendez finally came out 4 hours later, her face showed exhaustion, but not tragedy. She stabilized. It was a reaction to the treatment, not a progression of the disease, but we need to consider protocol adjustments. Sophia felt her legs turn to jelly. Sebastian held her as she processed the words. "Can I see her?" "She's asleep, but you can go in." In the hospital room, with machines beeping softly and Elena pale but breathing, Sophia finally allowed herself to feel the enormity of her love for this girl and her terror of losing her. Sebastian stayed all night. When Sophia finally fell asleep in the chair next to Elena's bed near dawn, he covered her shoulders with his jacket and then stood by the window, watching the two sisters and understanding with absolute clarity that they had stopped being his redemption project and had become his family. His chosen family, his recovered purpose, his chance to do it right this time. And as the sun rose over the city, painting the sky in pinks and golds, Sebastian Cortés made a silent promise. He would do everything in his power to protect these two people who, unknowingly, had saved him as much as he hoped to save them. The 3 months that followed redefined what it meant to be a family. Elena left the hospital a week after the crisis. Weaker physically, but with a spirit that refused to bend. The doctors had adjusted her treatment, combining the experimental protocol with supportive therapy that seemed to be working better. The numbers began to improve slowly. First 5%, then 8%, then 12% tumor reduction. Sebastian had become a constant presence, not in an overwhelming or invasive way, but as someone who simply belonged. He appeared on Tuesdays with homemade food that his personal chef prepared according to Elena's dietary needs. On Thursdays, he brought new books he thought the girl would like. On Saturdays, he took them both on small excursions when Elena felt energetic. The botanical garden, the science museum, once even to an outdoor concert where Elena could sit in a borrowed wheelchair and listen to live music for the first time in her life. But it was one Sunday afternoon when everything changed irrevocably. Sophia was in her small improvised workshop, now with better equipment thanks to sales from her exhibition, working on a particularly complex commissioned piece. Eleanor was napping in the bedroom. Sebastian was sitting on the sofa with his laptop, working in silence but present, as had become his custom in recent months. Suddenly, Elena screamed. It wasn't a scream of physical pain, but something deeper, more terrifying. Sophia and Sebastian ran simultaneously toward the bedroom, finding Elena sitting up in bed, pale and trembling, with her eyes open, but looking at something neither of them could see. "The car," Elena was shouting. "The blue truck! Sophia, watch out!" Sophia immediately recognized what was happening. For months after her parents' accident, Eleanor had had nightmares about the event she, fortunately, hadn't witnessed. But those nightmares had ceased more than a year ago. "I'm here, my love," Sophia said softly, sitting on the bed and taking Elena in her arms. "You're safe. It was just a bad dream." But Elena looked at her with strange clarity, her eyes slowly focusing. "It wasn't a dream. I remembered the accident." Sophia felt her blood freeze. "My love, you weren't there. You were home with the neighbor." "No," Eleanor insisted, her voice trembling. "I was there. In the car. I was going with them." Sebastian sat on the other side of the bed, his presence calming but not interrupting. Sophia felt the world spinning beneath her. "Elena, that's not possible. The neighbor said—" "The neighbor lied," said Elena, tears beginning to stream down her cheeks. "Mum and Dad took me with them. We were going to visit the new doctor, the specialist, the one they wanted to see me about my leg that hurt." Her voice broke. "And then the truck. And Mum screamed, sir, and everything went black." During the next 2 hours, as Eleanor slowly, painfully recovered fragments of memory she had blocked for 3 years, the complete truth emerged. Elena had been in the accident. She had survived with minor injuries because she was in the back seat with her seatbelt on, but the psychological trauma had been so severe that her young mind had erased the event completely, creating an alternative narrative where she was safe at home. The neighbor, Mrs. Morales, had conspired with social services to maintain this version of events, believing it was better for Eleanor's recovery not to remember the horror. Sophia, overwhelmed by grief and suddenly responsible for a 5-year-old girl, had accepted this version without questioning it. "Why now?" Sophia asked, holding Eleanor as the girl trembled. "Why are the memories coming back now?" Dr. Mendez called in emergency, explained when she arrived an hour later. "It's common in children who have experienced trauma. As they grow and develop better coping mechanisms, the mind sometimes decides it's safe to process what was previously too overwhelming. The fact that Elena is improving physically, that she feels more secure emotionally, may have triggered this process." "What does this mean for her treatment?" Sebastian asked, the first time he had spoken in hours. "She'll need psychological therapy in addition to medical treatment," the doctor responded. "Unprocessed trauma can affect physical recovery, but with proper support, this could actually be a blessing. Facing trauma instead of burying it can allow for more complete healing." That night, after Elena finally fell asleep exhausted, Sophia collapsed on the sofa next to Sebastian. "I failed," she whispered. "I didn't even know the truth about what happened. What else have I failed to see?" Sebastian turned her to face him. "You saved her life. You kept her alive against impossible odds. You gave her love, stability, hope. You didn't fail, Sophia. You did the best you could with the information you had." "But if I had known—" "You can't live in the if I had knowns. No one can." His voice was firm but gentle. "What matters is what we do now, with the truth we have." Sophia allowed herself to cry then, not just for Elena's renewed trauma, but for the 3 years of guilt she had carried, believing she should have been with her parents that day, that her survival was somehow unfair. Now she knew Elena had survived too, had been there, had lived what she had only imagined. "I can't do this alone," she finally admitted, the hardest words she had ever spoken. "I need help. Real help." Sebastian hugged her, and in that embrace was a wordless promise. The revelation of Elena's lost memories changed the dynamics of everything. Sophia hired the child therapist recommended by Dr. Mendez, a kind woman named Patricia Ruiz, who specialized in pediatric trauma. Sessions began twice a week, and gradually, Elena began to process what she had lived through. But the process wasn't linear or easy. There were nights of nightmares, days of regression where Elena didn't want to eat or talk, moments of inexplicable anger directed at Sophia for abandoning her that day, though she rationally knew Sophia hadn't been there. "It's normal," Patricia explained during a joint session. "Elena is processing not just the trauma of the accident, but also 3 years of suppressed memory and the confusion of not knowing what was real. Give her time, give her space, and above all, give her consistency." Sebastian became a pillar during this time. When Sophia was too emotionally exhausted to be patient, he stepped in with calm and understanding. When Elena had bad days, he simply sat with her in silence, playing chess or reading books aloud without demanding conversation. "Why do you do all this?" Sophia asked one night after Elena had finally calmed down after a particularly severe panic attack. They were on the small apartment balcony, sharing a bottle of cheap wine Sophia had stored away for special occasions that never came. Sebastian looked toward the illuminated city before responding. "When my son was 4, he broke his arm at the park. I was in a meeting on another continent, closing a deal worth $50 million. My wife called me, hysterical, and I told her to call the doctors, to send the bill to my assistant, that I had to get back to the meeting." His voice was flat, but the pain was evident. "I didn't even go to the hospital until 2 days later, and when I arrived, Matteo was afraid of me. He didn't recognize me as someone who would be there in a crisis." "Sebastian." "No," he interrupted. "Let me finish. That was the first crack in my marriage, but it wasn't the last. There were recitals I didn't attend, birthdays I forgot, nights when I came home when Matteo was already asleep. And when my wife finally left, when she told me she'd rather raise our son alone than with a father who was physically absent and emotionally distant, she was right. He took a sip of wine before continuing. When I met you, when I saw how you sacrificed everything for Elena, I realized what I had lost. And I thought, if I could do it over, if I could have another chance to be the kind of person who shows up, who stays, who prioritizes people over money, I would. And then I realized I had that chance, not with my son, not yet, but here, with you. Sophia took his hand, intertwining their fingers. You're not a replacement for what you lost. You're something new, something real for us. Us. Elena loves you. Sophia stopped, the words stuck in her throat. You what? I'm in love with you, she finally confessed, the words coming out in a whisper that sounded like a shout in the stillness of the night. And it terrifies me because everything I've loved, I've lost. My parents, my career, I've almost lost Elena 1,000 times, and I don't know if I can survive losing you too. Sebastian turned to look at her completely, his eyes bright with emotion. You're not going to lose me. Sophia, I love you. I've been in love with you since the night I saw you enter that hospital with more determination in your step than I had felt in years. I've been in love with you through every conversation, every stolen smile, every moment you've allowed me to be part of your life. And I'm not going to leave. They kissed then for the first time under the city's faint stars, with the sound of traffic as background music and the uncertain future stretching before them. It wasn't a movie kiss, perfect and choreographed. It was real, full of tears and hope and fear and love, all mixed in a moment that fundamentally changed them both. When they separated, Sophia laughed through her tears. This is crazy. 6 months ago, you were a rich stranger who watched me serve dinners. And you were a mysterious woman who cried in secret and created beauty in the midst of chaos. Sebastian wiped her tears with his thumb. Look how far we've come. Where do we go now? Wherever we decide to go, together. That night marked a turning point. It didn't solve all the problems. Elena was still sick. Sophia still worked too much. Life was still complicated. But now they faced it as a team, as a family that had chosen to be one. But the universe, as always, had more tests in store. 2 weeks later, Carla, Sophia's best friend, arrived at the apartment without warning. Her eyes were red from crying, and she had a manila envelope in her hands. I need to tell you something, she said, her voice trembling. Something I should have told you months ago. Sophia felt a chill of foreboding. What's wrong? Carla dropped the envelope on the kitchen table. The exhibition at the Modernist Gallery, the photos they sent of your work. It was me who sent them, but not in the way you think. What do you mean? Sebastian paid me to do it, 6 months ago, before you even formally knew each other. The words came out in an avalanche. He offered me $5,000 to send your photos to the gallery and make it seem organic, anonymous. I needed the money, Sophia. My ex had left me with debts and I accepted. Sophia felt as if the floor had opened beneath her. What? But wait, there's more, Carla continued, now crying openly. During the last few months I've been sabotaging you. Small things. Delaying emails from important clients, saying your pieces weren't available, planting doubts about your reliability with some contacts, rejecting collaboration proposals without telling you, because I was jealous, Sophia, jealous of your talent, of your success, of him. Each word was like a physical blow. Why? Why would you do that? Because I was afraid you'd forget me when you had everything you always wanted. Because I've been your friend for 10 years, but I was always the one in your shadow. And for once, when you were struggling, and I was... No, I have no excuse. It was petty and cruel, and there's no way I can make up for it. Sophia sat down slowly, processing the revelations. Sebastian had manipulated her from the beginning. Her anonymous benefactor hadn't been so anonymous after all. And her best friend, the person she had trusted for years, had systematically betrayed her. You need to leave, Sophia said, her voice dangerously calm. Now. Sophia, please. Leave! Carla left, leaving the envelope and her confession behind. Sophia sat in her kitchen, surrounded by the chaos of her life. Jewelry materials, medical bills, Elena's toys, and felt fury and pain mix into something unbearable. When Sebastian arrived that night as usual, Sophia was waiting for him. Elena was already in bed, and the expression on Sophia's face made him immediately know something terrible had happened. Carla came today, Sophia said without preamble. She told me everything, how you paid her to send my photos, how from the beginning this was manipulation. Sebastian went pale. Sophia, let me explain. Explain what? That you lied? That you orchestrated everything? That every coincidence was carefully planned? Her voice rose. You told me you wanted honesty. You said no anonymous surprises. And it was all a lie from day one. It wasn't a lie. My feelings were never a lie. How can I know that? How can I know what's real and what's just another of your manipulations? Sebastian approached, but Sophia stepped back. When I met you, you were right to reject my help. You were right to be suspicious. I was accustomed to controlling situations, to making things happen. And yes, I hired Carla to send your photos because I knew you would never accept direct help. It was manipulative, and it was wrong. What else did you orchestrate? The curator who loved my work? The collectors who bought my pieces? Was it all bought? Was it all fake? No, Sebastian denied vehemently. Only the initial photos. Everything else, every sale, every positive review, every opportunity that followed was genuine. Your talent is real, Sophia. The world responded to your work because it's extraordinary, not because I paid someone. But I can't trust that now. I can't trust anything. Then make me earn it again, Sebastian pleaded. Let me prove to you that what's between us is real. You can't. The tears finally fell. Because the foundation of everything was rotten from the beginning. And I can't build a life with someone who thought it was acceptable to lie to me for my own good. Sophia, please, I need you to leave, and I need time. A lot of time. Sebastian looked at her for a long moment, and in his eyes was a desperation she had never seen. But finally he nodded. Okay. But Sophia, please remember, I love you. That was never a lie. And I'll wait as long as it takes. When he left, Sophia finally allowed herself to collapse. She cried for the betrayal, for the loss, for the confusion of not knowing what was real in her life. And for the first time in months, she faced the night completely alone. The following 2 months were the darkest Sophia had faced since her parents' death. She cut off contact with Sebastian completely. She blocked his number, rejected his emails, returned the packages he tried to send her. She ended her friendship with Carla definitively, and she immersed herself in work with an intensity that bordered on self-destruction. Elena, who had witnessed part of the conflict and understood more than Sophia gave her credit for, became quiet and withdrawn. She missed Sebastian but didn't dare mention him. She watched her sister work until dawn, barely eating, functioning on pure adrenaline and coffee, and worried in silence. Why doesn't Sebastian come anymore? She finally asked one night, her voice small. Sophia looked up from the piece she was working on, her eyes bloodshot. Because he lied, my love, and we can't trust people who lie. But don't you always say everyone makes mistakes, that what's important is learning from them? The simple childish logic cut through the armor of anger Sophia had built. Sometimes children see truths that adults refuse to recognize because they're not blinded by pride or wounds from the past. It's complicated. It doesn't sound complicated, it sounds like you're afraid. Afraid of what? Of being happy, because if you're happy, you might lose it, like you lost Mom and Dad. Elena looked at her with those 2 wise eyes. But Sophia, if you never allow yourself to be happy for fear of losing it, you've already lost it anyway. Sophia didn't know what to answer to that. Meanwhile, Sophia's work continued to prosper professionally, even as her personal life crumbled. An international jewelry brand, Millionaire, had offered her a contract to design an exclusive line. The money was enough to secure Elena's treatments for the next 2 years and allow Sophia to finally leave her restaurant job. It should have been a triumph. Instead, it felt empty. One afternoon, while reviewing the contract with Clara, her lawyer, something stopped her. In fine print, there was a clause about creative consultants that the brand reserved the right to assign. "What's this?" she asked. Clara frowned. "That's unusual. Normally the artist has complete creative control. Let me investigate." What Clara discovered was revealing. Sebastian Cortez was one of Lumiere's principal investors. He didn't have direct control over creative decisions, but his influence was undeniable. The offer to Sophia, though legitimate, had probably been facilitated by him. "So what do I do?" Sophia asked, exhausted. "Do I reject an incredible opportunity just because he had something to do with it? Where does his influence end and my real merit begin?" "That's a question only you can answer," Clara said gently. "But I'll tell you this. The fact that he has influence doesn't mean your work isn't exceptional. Lumiere wouldn't risk its reputation on someone without real talent, no matter who recommends them." Sophia signed the contract, but the doubt kept gnawing at her. It was Dr. Mendez who finally confronted her. Eleanor had had another follow-up appointment, and the results were extraordinary. The tumors had shrunk by 35% total. She was on the path to remission. "You should be celebrating," the doctor observed, when Sophia barely reacted to the news. "Instead, you seem more miserable than when the prognosis was grim." "I'm happy," Sophia lied. "Where is Mr. Cortez? He used to be at all the appointments." "He's no longer part of our lives." Dr. Mendez studied Sophia for a long moment. "Sophia, I'm going to step out of my role as a doctor for a second and speak as someone who has seen many lives. Pride won't keep you warm at night. Resentment won't give you company in difficult moments. And perfection doesn't exist in any human relationship." He lied. "And you're punishing yourself, Elena, and him for a mistake he made when he barely knew you." The doctor leaned forward. "The question isn't whether he made a mistake. The question is whether who he is now, after months of demonstrating his commitment, is worth forgiving that initial mistake." That night, Sophia found herself on her balcony with the phone in her hand, looking at Sebastian's number that she had never really deleted. Her finger hovered over the call button for 20 minutes before she finally set the phone aside. She wasn't ready. Not yet. The moment of truth came in a way Sophia didn't expect. It was Elena's birthday, 9 years old, and against all odds the girl was healthy enough to have a small party. Sophia had invited 3 classmates Elena had met during her brief periods at school and had decorated the small apartment with balloons and streamers. Elena was radiant, wearing a new dress and a pretty wig that hid her still sparse hair. But Sophia could see something was missing in her sister's eyes, a sadness that no amount of gifts or cake could remedy. Halfway through the party, the doorbell rang. Sophia opened the door expecting one of the children's parents, and instead found a messenger holding a huge box wrapped in silver gift paper. "Sofia Ramirez, I have a delivery for Elena." There was no card, but Sophia didn't need one. She would recognize the expensive type of wrapping and the perfectly tied bow anywhere. Eleanor opened the gift under the expectant gaze of her friends. Inside was a complete collection of the book series Eleanor had been reading in the hospital, but not regular editions. They were signed first editions by the author, along with a personal letter from the writer addressed to Elena, encouraging her in her recovery. "It's from Sebastian!" Elena shouted with joy, finding a small note at the bottom of the box. "I knew he hadn't forgotten me." Sophia felt as if she'd been punched in the stomach. For 2 months she had been so focused on her own wound, her own betrayal, that she hadn't fully considered what her decision was costing Elena. The girl had lost her parents. Now she was losing someone who had become a father figure. After the guests left, and Elena was in bed rereading her favorite book from the collection, Sophia sat on the sofa and finally allowed the truth to hit her. She had been punishing Sebastian, yes, but she had also been punishing herself, confirming her deeply rooted belief that she didn't deserve to be happy, that everything she loved would eventually be taken away, so better not to love at all. She took her phone and, before she could convince herself otherwise, called Sebastian. He answered after the first ring, his voice hoarse as if he hadn't slept in days. "Sophia, can you come? I need to talk to you. I'll be there in 10 minutes. It was exactly 9 minutes. When Sophia opened the door, she was surprised by his appearance. Sebastian, always so impeccable, looked haggard. He had lost weight, had deep dark circles, and his clothes, though still expensive, were wrinkled. "You look terrible," she said without thinking. "You look beautiful," he responded. As always. They sat on the sofa, maintaining a careful distance between them. "Elena loved the books," Sophia began. "I'm glad." "Sebastian, I need to understand something. Why did you do it? Not just with the photos, but everything. Why did you get so involved in our lives?" Sebastian took a deep breath. The complete truth, without excuses or justifications. The complete truth. "When my wife left with my son, she left me a letter. It said I had become a man who measured everything in terms of transactions and results, that I had forgotten that human relationships aren't businesses you can optimize and control, and she was right." He ran a hand through his hair. "When I saw you that first night, I saw someone who lived in a way I had forgotten, with real purpose, with sacrificial love, with courage that had nothing to do with money. And I wanted to be near that. I wanted some of that to rub off on me. So we were your redemption project. At first, maybe. But at some point, it stopped being about me. It became about you. About Elena and her laughter when I read her stories. About your eyes when you talked about your art. About the way you made me feel I could be better than I had been." Sophia felt tears burning. "The problem is you made the decision for me. You decided you knew better than me what I needed, what I deserved. And that took away my agency, my choice." "I know, and I have no excuse for that except I was accustomed to solving problems with resources, not with respect." Sebastian looked at her directly. "If I could go back, I would do it differently. I would have met you honestly without subterfuge. I would have trusted that we would get here anyway because what's between us is real. How can I know what's real?" "This," Sebastian said, taking her hand. "The last 2 months have been hell, not because of losing access to you, but because of knowing I hurt you, because of knowing my arrogance and my need for control hurt the person I care about most. That's real. My love for you is real. My love for Elena is real. Everything else, the details of how it started, are important, and I was wrong, but they don't change the fundamental thing." Sophia closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision before her. She could hold on to her justified anger, her wound, and be right, but alone. Or she could choose the terrifying risk of trusting again, of believing people can grow and change. "If I do this," she said finally, "if I forgive you and we try again, it has to be different. No secrets, no making decisions for my good without consulting me. Genuine partners or nothing." "Genuine partners," Sebastian agreed immediately. "And Sophia, about professional opportunities. If my influence ever opens a door for you, I'll tell you in advance. The decision to walk through that door will be yours. Always. And Elena, she already sees you as part of the family. If you come back into her life, you can't leave again. She can't lose someone else." "I'm not going to leave," Sebastian promised. "This time I'm saying it with full knowledge of what I'm promising. I'm not going to leave when it's difficult. I'm not going to leave when it scares me. I'm not going to leave ever." Sophia studied his face, searching for signs of doubt or manipulation. All she saw was raw honesty, vulnerability, and love. "Okay," she whispered. "One more chance. But Sebastian, if you lie to me again, I won't. I swear by everything I am." They kissed then, a kiss different from the first. This wasn't about discovery or desperate passion, but about conscious choice, about choosing to build something together despite the cracks in the foundation. The following months were of reconstruction. Sebastian kept every promise. When Lumiere offered to expand Sophia's contract, he honestly told her about his connection with the company and gave her all the information for her to decide. When investment opportunities arose in her work, he completely recused himself, referring other investors to avoid any conflict of interest. But more important than professional matters was the transformation of their personal dynamic. Sebastian began therapy, working with a counselor on his control tendencies and his need to fix everything. Sophia began her own therapy, processing years of trauma, survivor's guilt, and her fear of abandonment. And together, as an improvised family, they found their rhythm. Elena continued to improve. For her 10th birthday, the doctors officially used the word that had seemed impossible: remission. The cancer was undetectable. She would have to do regular follow-ups for years, but for now she was a healthy girl. The celebration was small but perfect. Sebastian cooked. It turned out he had been taking cooking classes in secret for months, wanting to contribute in practical ways. Sophia made a special necklace for Elena with the symbol of new beginning, and the three of them, along with some of Elena's close friends from school, celebrated not just a birthday but a victory. "I have a question," Elena said that night after the guests had left. Sophia and Sebastian, who were washing dishes together in the small kitchen, turned to her. "When are you going to marry Sebastian, Sophia?" Sophia almost dropped the plate she was holding. Sebastian started coughing, choking on the water he was drinking. "Elena, that's not—" "But you love each other," Elena interrupted with relentless childish logic. "And he lives here almost all the time anyway. And I want him to be my family for real, not just my family, in fact." Sebastian looked at Sophia with an expression that mixed surprise and something deeper. "You know she has a point." "What?" Sophia looked at him incredulous. "Are you joking?" "I'm not joking." Sebastian put down the dish towel and walked toward her. "Sophia Ramirez, I don't have a ring right now, and this isn't the perfect, planned proposal I imagined. But Elena is right. I love you. I love Elena. I want to be your husband, her adoptive father if you'll let me, and an official part of this extraordinary family we've built." Sophia felt tears begin to fall. "This is absurd. We reconciled only 6 months ago. We're barely rebuilding trust." "And we can keep rebuilding it as husband and wife as much as boyfriend and girlfriend," Sebastian said. "I'm not saying we have to get married tomorrow, but I'm saying I want that future with you, that I'm committed to that future." Elena clapped excitedly. "Say yes, Sophia. Say yes." Sophia looked between her sister and the man she loved and felt something shift in her chest. For years she had lived with fear, with the expectation of loss, with the belief that happiness was something temporary that would always be taken away. But here she was with a sister in remission, a thriving career, and a man who loved her enough to work on himself, to change, to stay. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Sebastian. I want to marry you." Elena's squeal of joy was so loud it probably woke the neighbors. Sebastian lifted Sophia and spun her, laughing and crying at the same time. And in that small apartment that had witnessed so much pain, there was finally complete joy, without reservations or fears in the shadows. That night, after Elena finally fell asleep, it took hours, too excited to calm down, Sophia and Sebastian sat on the balcony under the stars. "I want to buy you a proper ring," Sebastian said. "Something worthy of you." "I want to make it myself," Sophia responded. "I want to design our wedding rings, something that tells our story." "And what story would that be?" Sophia thought for a moment. "Two broken people who found each other in darkness, who made mistakes, who hurt each other, but who chose to stay, learn, grow, who built something beautiful, not despite their imperfections, but through them." "I like that story," Sebastian said, kissing her forehead. "And how does it end?" "It hasn't ended yet. It's just beginning." April sunlight streamed through the studio windows, illuminating thousands of small tools and jewelry materials organized with meticulous precision. Sophia Ramirez Cortez, she had kept both names, insisting her identity not be lost in marriage, was working on a particularly complex piece when she heard shouts of joy from the garden. She looked out the window and smiled. Eleanor, now 13 and completely healthy, was teaching Mateo, Sebastian's son, who now lived with them 6 months a year after a revised custody agreement, how to play soccer. Sebastian was sitting on the grass, watching with an expression of complete satisfaction. They had sold the small apartment 2 years ago and bought a modest house on the city's outskirts. Not a mansion, Sophia had insisted on something more humble, but a true home with space for her studio, a garden for the children, and a kitchen where they could cook together. Sophia's jewelry business had grown beyond her wildest dreams. Her line with Lumiere was one of the brand's best-selling products. She had opened her own store in the Arts District, where she sold her designs and also taught classes to young emerging artists. Part of her profits went to a fund she had established for families with sick children, helping them with treatment costs. Sebastian had drastically reduced his work commitments. He had sold half his commercial properties and reinvested in affordable housing and community development projects. He spent 3 days a week in the office and the rest at home, present in ways he had never been with his first child. The relationship with his ex-wife had improved enough that Matteo felt comfortable moving between two families, and the boy, who had been cautious at first, now adored Elena as a sister and had begun calling Sophia Mom Sophia without anyone asking him to. "Sophia," Sebastian called from the garden. "Come, you have to see this." Sophia left her work and went out. In the garden, Elena had organized a kind of improvised exhibition of her own artistic creations. The girl had inherited Sophia's talent and had begun making her own pieces. "Look," Elena said with pride, "this is for you, for your wedding anniversary next week." It was a simple but beautiful pendant, 3 intertwined circles representing Sophia, Sebastian, and Elena. In the center, where they joined, was a small opal stone that changed color with the light. "It represents how we're stronger together," Elena explained, "and the opal is for hope, like you taught me." Sophia hugged her sister, now almost as tall as her, and felt gratitude so deep it hurt. True wealth is not measured in bank accounts or material possessions. But in moments like these, simple, perfect, filled with love so genuine, it takes your breath away. That night, after the children were asleep, Sophia and Sebastian sat on the back porch with glasses of wine, watching the stars that were now visible outside the city. "Do you remember when you said our story was just beginning?" Sebastian asked. "Yes. You were right. Every day with you is a new beginning, a new opportunity to do better." Sophia snuggled against him, feeling his warmth and solidity. "Do you ever regret it? How it all started? The complications? Abandoning your previous life?" Sebastian looked at her with that intensity that still made her heart beat faster. "Never. My previous life was an empty shell. All of this, is real. It's messy and complicated and perfect in all the ways that matter. We still have problems, you know," Sophia pointed out. "Matteo is struggling with math, Elena is starting adolescence, and I can already see it's going to be a challenge. The business is growing so fast that sometimes I feel overwhelmed. Your mother still isn't completely comfortable with—" "Shh," Sebastian interrupted with a smile. "I know, and we'll face each of those problems together, as we've faced everything else." Sophia smiled. Together. In the distance, an owl hooted. Inside the house, Matteo shouted in his sleep, something about soccer and goals, and calmed down again. Elena moved in her bed, unconsciously reaching for the stuffed animal Sebastian had given her years ago, and Sophia, looking at her husband under the stars, thought about the entire path they had traveled. From that rainy night when he followed her to the hospital, through betrayal and forgiveness, through pain and celebration, to this perfect moment on their porch, with their children sleeping safely inside, and an entire future stretching before them. "I love you," she whispered, for the 1000th time, but always feeling it like the first. "And I love you," Sebastian responded. "Today, tomorrow, always." They stayed there until the stars began to fade with dawn, 2 people who had found in darkness a light they never expected, and who had built not a fairy tale, but something better, a real, authentic, imperfect, and absolutely beautiful life.